let's kick off this week's show by just jumping into our overall thoughts. Brie, I'll start with you. What did you think of episode 5?
Well, it was crazy. I immediately texted you afterwards and I said, "Whoa, that was crazy." I definitely think, you know what? I'll say it. I think it was worth the wait. Um, I think with an episode like that, we built up so much anticipation for it, and I think they really paid off what we
Mhm.
were the long wait. Um, I just think there was so many questions were answered that we were left with at the end of episode 4. But now I feel like there's so many more questions. Um, so I'm excited that we get to see a new episode next week. Overall, yeah, I think it was a great episode. We touched on all the characters, a lot of the plots, subplots. Um, we lost some characters. We gained some characters. Really crazy, but really, really great at the same time. What did you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I thought it was definitely worth the wait. And one thing I thought while watching was because obviously this season, unlike the last season, which I think was just, 8 consecutive weeks, this one was obviously split into two.
Hmm.
Um, and so it does kind of feel like season 2, episode 4 and season 2, episode 5, like it definitely feels like they were written with the intention of, it's gonna season 2, episode 4 will cap off in November, and then episode 5 will pick up a few months after that. It's like they kind of wrote it with that in mind, I guess, that
Hmm.
the audience would be coming back to this world, and after how crazy the season 2, episode 4 was. There's like they give us a lot of time to breathe, I feel like, at the start. And then obviously it gets a bit more intense later in the episode. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think it would have been, as much as I missed the show in its hiatus, I could see how, watching that big like Viltrumite battle at the end of episode 4 and then only having to wait a week and then jumping into this one could have been a lot. So I can it kind of makes more sense now, why it was split up, and I think it was worth the wait.
Yeah, I completely agree. They definitely episode 4 definitely felt like a mid-season finale, and this one definitely felt like a mid-season premiere. So they did a
Yeah.
wonderful job doing that. Well, let's kind of go through what happened in this episode. We so much, like I said, so much happened. So I think we should kind of go through some of the biggest things that happened. Of
Yeah.
course, we start with Mark not back on Earth. And I'll say it when episode 4 ended, I was like, how is he supposed to make it back to Earth? He's beaten and bruised and bleeding.
That's true. Yeah.
I was like, ah, what? And the Viltrumics were like, or not the Viltrumics, we're the
We're the Viltrumites. They're the Viltrumites.
they're the Viltrumites. They were like, you have to go back to Earth now. But I was like, you're not gonna help him. And then I was like, oh, okay, he's not going to go back right away. So it was really cool to see him stay back and heal up and help rebuild Andressa's world. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it was also so interesting to see how old they were.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I knew that they aged quicker than humans or quicker than Mark, but I did not think they would age that fast. When Nulzal, is that how you pronounce it? I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe.
cool. When Nulzal walked out, I was like, oh my God, he's old now. This is so sad. So I was really curious, like, what that time difference was. But then it
Mhm.
was revealed to us that he was there for 2 months.
Yeah.
Um, that was cool. Um,
Very cool. Mhm.
then
And we should go ahead. Go ahead.
oh. And then we see me more of Oliver. I think he's gotten bigger. Um, and you just see Mark's demeanor change with him.
Yeah.
You can see that he's like approaching him with a more brotherly. kind of love. And then, of course,
Yeah.
Andressa tells Mark, like, I'm gonna die soon. Like,
Mhm.
can you please take him? Which was crazy.
Yeah. And I love how, oh, we should also maybe um, preface all this by saying that
Oh,
neither Bree or I have read the comics. Um, I've kind of like, I'm aware of some of future events, some general lore, some characters that I know are supposed to come into play later, but I've never sat down and actually read it, mainly because I love the first season so much that I wanted to just watch the show mostly as blind as possible.
mhm.
Um, and so I know Bree is, a similar
Yeah,
approaching this. And
I have nothing. I don't know anything that's about to go down. So it's really interesting watching these episodes with no knowledge of what's going to go down. So
yeah,
that was like the first part of the episode. If you want to jump into the second part, we'll jump more, or we'll dive deeper into more detail later on.
yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of how the episode starts. Again, it definitely gives us a lot of time to breathe.
Hmm.
Um, and then we kind of move into Earth. Mark goes back to college, talks to Amber, talks to his mom, brings Oliver with him. Um, Surprisingly, like after the events of episode 4, I was kind of expecting like maybe a lot of urgency at the start of this episode, but it's
Mm.
surprisingly laid back, which I understand. I think from like a storytelling perspective, like give us that breathing room. Um,
Hmm.
but it is almost like if I was Mark,
Yeah.
like I'd be like, holy shit, guys, like. Like I'd be so stressed going back to Earth.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
he didn't really have a choice though.
yeah.
He's too he's too human.
Mhm.
He has all these feelings. I don't think he really had a choice what to do with Oliver. I mean, it was really like an ultimatum, like you leave him here and his mother dies and the rest of his community dies, or you take him
Yeah.
to Earth. So, yeah, but we can dive more into that later.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah, and then um there's some stuff with Donald that we'll get to later, which is pretty interesting.
I'm rooting for
Um,
him.
yeah, I like Donald.
Team Donald.
And then kind of in the back half of the episode, we're with Invincible and we're with the Guardians, Adam Eve, and then it's pretty action packed in like the last 20-ish minutes. Um, so a lot to talk about there. They finally bring back the whole Mars plotline that was set up in like season 1, maybe episode 3 or 4,
Hmm.
pretty early on. And then I think at the end of season 1, in like that big montage, there's like a clip of the sequence maybe starting to take over.
Yeah, I've
Um,
always been so curious, like when we were going to come back to that and like what that meant for Earth. And now
yeah.
we're finally there. And I mean, at this point, I thought it was so hilarious when Rexplode was like, "It's not like there's gonna be two
Right.
major earth-shattering events happen at the same time," and then there was. It was
Hmm.
crazy. He really told us what was gonna happen. Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
we were with the Guardians of the Globe on both Earth and Mars. Or on the way to Mars, I guess.
Yeah. I think the whole like Mars side plot is definitely, I remember when they set it up and then they just don't really touch on it again because they kind of explore other plot threads. But it is like I remember being kind of stressed out by it when they set it up, and I was like, oh, this is going to be such an issue later. And finally now they're finally tackling it. And obviously we'll go into more detail soon, but I am kind of curious, like how big of a moment in the show it's going to be or not. Like if it will
Y-
get resolved in the next episode or maybe carry out through the rest of the season.
mhm. Yeah, I feel like they do bringing it back to how it kind of stressed you out when it first happened. I think this show does a really great job of presenting this issue that we know is going to be really bad and then kind
Yeah,
of leaving it for later. And then when it comes back later, it's terrible. So much time has been in between that, like the issue has just like built up more and more. Like the
yeah,
sequids have built more and more power. So I think that the show does a really good job at doing that, and they never leave anything behind. They're never like, here's this thing, and then they always come back to it, which is really great.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely a pretty like so far um very well like thought out. And obviously it's based on source material that
Hmm.
kind of has mapped it out for them, but still like, implementing it into like a episodic format and kind of strategically placing all these like plot threads. They're doing really well with it so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like also what the show does a great job of is wrapping up these various problems very quickly. Like what you said with the Mars mission, you were curious if it was gonna continue for the rest of the season. So
Mhm.
I'm curious to see what they do with that, because I feel like there's a good balance in the issues and how quickly they're able to handle them and how
Mhm.
detrimental they are. So really, really curious to see where that goes.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of just uh potential like, you send all the guardians over and then, there's a lot of potential for like one or two of them to be taken over by the sequids and maybe if they have to fight each other. I don't know if like if you're taken over, if that means you die or if you can be like freed from it.
Mm.
Um,
Oh yeah.
so that's a good question, and we can circle back to it in a sec. Um, but yeah, so there's a lot going on there, and then on Earth, our few remaining heroes gotta tackle the Lizard League, um, who
Which
are
I
such a
completely forgot about.
yeah. I forgot they were up to something. Such a goofy, you know, a goofy set of characters, I think intentionally, but we'll have to talk about it a lot because it's a pretty intense fight scene.
Yeah. King Lizard reminds me a lot of the Riddler, but
Yeah, yeah.
specifically the Riddler in the Harley Quinn series.
Oh, okay,
He's
yeah,
just
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of goofy. I think King Lizard definitely has a lot more power in the Invincible world, but he just
Mhm.
has that like goofy demeanor to him where you can't really take him seriously because he's taking himself too seriously. He
Yeah,
thinks he's the greatest ever, but I don't know. Maybe
yeah,
he is. Maybe he is. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll be surprised by him.
yeah. He's pretty comical. But
Yeah.
clearly they're nothing to scoff at least against some of the weaker heroes.
Hmm.
So we'll definitely talk
Yeah.
about that. And then the episode, ends on two big cliffhangers, and then there's a post-credit scene featuring Alan the alien, which is
Alan,
such a such a cool guy.
such a cool guy. I was devastated when I thought we lost him. I was
Yeah,
so sad. I, yeah. So I was so happy to see him and hear his voice again.
yeah. Seth Rogen just has like a really, really like comforting voice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it's the kind of voice where you can obviously tell that it's Seth Rogen, but it works so well with all of the different characters he voices.
It yeah, it does
It
work really
adds
well.
such a character to them, such a depth to them.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to jump more into that post-credit scene because I was not expecting it at all. I know Invincible always has these incredible post-credit scenes too. I don't know why I was expecting any less in this
Mhm.
episode.